go back to the legal part of it, because it's a fairly unprecedented order today's. We haven't seen an instance where the Supreme Court has given interim bail to a politician, and that too for campaigning reasons. So let me now introduce you to two legal luminaries who will be joining us. First, I want to go across to Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, Mr. Kapil Sibal. Thank you very much, Mr. Sibal, for speaking with us. So the Supreme Court today has granted interim bail to Mr. Kejriwal, but the court has said that this is just interim and he has to surrender on the 2nd of June. He can take part in campaigning, but he cannot refer to any of the facts of the case. Even in passing, he cannot talk about the case. The BJP is saying that this is just interim bail, and that too with very strict conditions attached. This in no way indicates any kind of absence of guilt. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's all irrelevant. That's all irrelevant. I mean, I personally think that he should have got bail. But anyway, the Supreme Court has granted him interim bail. That's welcome. The fact of the matter is that he should be allowed to participate in the elections. These are mere allegations. There is no proven case. The stage of trial has not arisen. There is no charge sheet in terms of there are no charges framed. So what is it? This is all allegations that have been made, and by whom? By people who themselves are accused. Remember, what are the allegations that are being relied upon at this point in time? Allegations of what are called approvers. Who is an approver? You should know an approver is a person who himself is an accused, who seeks to take the benefit of being an approver and not being prosecuted and then implicating others. In this particular case, the approver is a person who made 11 statements before he named Kejriwal. In other words, what kind of credibility does a person have who makes an oral statement implicating somebody without any proof? And Supreme Court in several judgments has said that you can never rely on an approver statement unless it's substantiated by independent corroborative evidence, and there is none here.
But Mr. Sibal, isn't there an inherent contradiction in the order of the court today, at least as far as its implications are concerned? Because on the one hand, the court's order says that Mr. Kejriwal can campaign. It is extending him the liberty to go ahead and campaign because he's a well-known opposition figure, and while elections are happening, you cannot have an uneven playing field. Therefore, it is extending him that liberty. But at the same time, he cannot fulfill his administrative duties as Chief Minister of Delhi. So political responsibility he can fulfill, but not administrative responsibility. And of course, I must stress that Mr. Kejriwal continues to hold on to the post of Chief Minister of Delhi, which for all practical purposes is the administrative head of the national capital. Isn't there an inherent contradiction in that order by the Supreme Court? Because one part is being granted, the other part is not.
I don't know whether there's a contradiction or not. While Supreme Court has passed an order, I don't want to criticize that particular order. But the fact of the matter is that this is a case where there is no evidence at all. This is a case where the man should not have been arrested. This is a case that he should have gotten bail, regular bail at the first instance. This is a case where there is no money trail. This is a case where you're trying to arrest a sitting chief minister just before the election. This is a case in which if you continue to arrest him as you have, there is no level playing field. And I think it is very unfortunate that the ED is allowed to foist false cases on individuals who have to participate not just in elections, but who are leaders of parties and who have been chief ministers of states. This happened in the case of Hemant Soren, and it's now happening in the case of Kejriwal.
But for example, politically speaking, of course, Delhi votes on the 25th later this month. Certainly, the BJP is going to make this a huge talking point of the campaign trail, perhaps even the single biggest issue, this liquor gate here in Delhi in the campaign once it gets into high gear here in Delhi. On the other hand, one of the conditions that's been imposed by the court today is that Mr. Kejriwal, even when he's campaigning, cannot refer to his case, the particularities of the allegations against him, the liquor gate case, he cannot refer to it. So here is a case where in the court of public opinion, the BJP will go hammer and tongs against Mr. Kejriwal on this issue, which it rightfully or otherwise believes is the number one issue in this campaign in Delhi. And Mr. Kejriwal, for all practical purposes, is handicapped because he can't respond to the BJP.
Isn't that unfair? Isn't that unfair that the opposition can allege that he is involved in the liquor scam and he can't respond? Isn't that a bit unfair? That you allow the government here, the BJP here, to make allegations against Kejriwal and he can't respond? Either there should be a ban order, the gag order, on everybody not to make any allegations against Kejriwal on this issue, or you allow him to respond. But I think again, actually, the whole idea is that in the context of an election, especially to the Lok Sabha, under Article 324 of the Constitution, the elections must be fair and free. Free and fair elections is part of basic structure of the Constitution. If you allow one side to make statements and not allow the other side to contradict them, if you keep a sitting chief minister in jail without a trial, it's unfair. It doesn't make the election free and fair. And I want to give you an example of Hardik Patel, and something that I said in the morning also. In the case of Hardik Patel, he was convicted of an offense. He was not granted stay by the High Court. He came to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court granted stay of conviction. And after they granted stay of conviction, he filed a nomination to fight the election, I think in 2022 December in Gujarat. He won the election, he had joined the BJP, and he is in that party, and he is convicted. This is a case of a conviction. Here you have a sitting chief minister against whom a trial has not started, against whom there is no evidence, against whom there are allegations, and he can't fight an election, and he can't participate in the election. What kind of logic is that?
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Mr. Kapil Sibal, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, thank you for joining us and putting that into perspective for our viewers. I also want to get another view, not a contrarian, but a slightly different, a slightly more nuanced view, different from what Mr. Sibal's is. Aryama Sundaram is also Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. He's now joining us. Mr. Sundaram, the bench, by passing such an order, has it created a questionable precedent? It has given bail expressly for purposes of campaigning and nothing else, which also means that this is only something that A, politicians can avail of. The ordinary Aam Aadmi or Aam Aurat cannot avail of this provision for bail. And B, this also means that other politicians who may be facing trial or waiting for trial with grave charges, perhaps even graver than what Mr. Kejriwal faces, can use this as a precedent for saying that we need to go out and campaign, therefore grant us bail.
I believe the court actually followed precedents so far as interim bail were concerned. I think the bench of the Supreme Court relied on a judgment of one of them, Justice Khanna, when he was in the High Court itself, where he discusses the scope of interim bail as something which is granted when regular bail cannot be granted at a stage, or a bail application is pending, or a challenge is pending. So interim bail is given in extraordinary situations. Now, on the facts of this matter, the court held it was an extraordinary situation since it was to deal with the national party, the leader of a national party. There is a Lok Sabha elections, which is vital for the democracy of India. And therefore, the court felt that the extraordinary situation had arisen and granted the bail. So I do not believe it is without precedence.
Okay.
I believe it is something which is innate in Article 21, combined with the basic structure of the Constitution, which includes democracy, and combined with a situation where there's an imminent poll. The leader of a national party is required for his party, is required to campaign for his party, and to deprive both the party, him, and the people of his presence at that time. the court weighed all this and I believe came to a conclusion that the interim bail was justified at this stage.
But Mr. Sundaram, obviously the issue for which he was facing these charges, the Liquorgate scam, the court has also said he cannot refer to the subject matter of the Liquorgate probe, in which, of course, he himself is an accused. The point is that this will now be the big talking point on the campaign trail. Stump speeches by the BJP is going to target Mr. Kejriwal on this very issue. So, irrespective of what happens in court, in the court of public opinion, in the campaign trail, when the Delhi campaign shifts into high gear, Mr. Kejriwal will not be able to respond to any of the charges that's made in the court of public opinion. He may be able to respond in a court of law through his lawyers, but not in the court of public opinion, which again goes back to that whole point of whether the court was coming up with a rather innovative or unprecedented way of giving him bail just to campaign.
Well, Mr. Kejriwal can always refer to the fact that he has been arrested, can refer to the fact that what he believes about things generally, qua incarceration, etc., but cannot actually comment on what the case itself is, which is but natural since it is sub judice also. And while so, what is going on in the case and how the court will decide and otherwise, other things like that, being sub judice, I don't think anybody can really comment on what the outcome or the likely outcome of the case is, or the merits and demerits of the case, what is pending in court. So I believe that what is really being said is that don't go out and discuss the case itself. I think that would be the purport of the order from how I understand it.
But one final word. In past cases, whether it is a Hemant Soren, a Jagan Mohan Reddy, even a Jayalalitha, Om Prakash Chautala, etc., there are a number of cases where courts of law, including the Supreme Court, has denied granting bail to politicians who were convicted of financial misappropriation, etc., for express purposes of election campaigning. So, why has the court made this exception? What is so exceptional about Kejriwal that was not the case for Jayalalitha or Jagan Mohan Reddy?
I think the big takeaway from the order of the Supreme Court is that the Supreme Court recognized one factor, which was when the state, the ED, tried to argue that you cannot treat bail people differently with regard to bail, and it cannot be said that in one person's case it is justified, not in another. The court pointed out very clearly that in matters of bail, it is relevant. It is relevant as to the person who's asking for the bail and the circumstance he's asking, the situation which is there. And while so has carved out a very fundamental fact situation for the court to analyze, to decide whether to grant bail or not. And basically the takeaway is that if the fact situation in a given person's case makes out an extraordinary circumstance, the court has the power to give interim bail. And in the case of Mr. Kejriwal, found that an extraordinary situation had been made out in his fact situation, all things considered, and granted the bail. So I won't say that it is a cut and dried precedence that anyone in politics is granted bail, far from it.
All right,
it will have
Aryama
to be
Sundaram,
taken in the fact situation of a given case.
we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Mr. Sundaram, for joining us and giving us your take, your perspective on what today's order means and what its implications could be.